We're going to move into the panel discussion, and I hope we will have Daniela will be with us in the panel section, but we will also have 3 other people coming from various places around the earth, so Paraguay, Ecuador. So I would like to have the 4 panel members on the screen, if that's possible, if they are there. There we have them. We have Daniela Tilbury, we have Raquel Frata, who's leader of initiatives for the new economy. Well, there we all have you. I was just kind of trying to present all of you, but the 4 of you are there. Daniela Tilbury, we already know you. Kind of a couple of thought-provoking things for me very much about, okay, but is education currently as we do it, is that greenwashing what we're doing, or should we do it in a different way? What is the role of the educators then still? How do we change that when we don't know where we're changing towards to? A couple of those things that we will touch upon. So they're kind of for me very, very interesting. And also maybe just like, do we still need a classroom anyways? Or is that maybe too much the old-fashioned way that will not solve the problems? You know, those kind of things. But first, so I'll let people already think a bit about those things. First, I would like to move to Raquel Frata, who is from the foundation Moises Bertoni in Paraguay, and who has set up, well, maybe one of those schools where you think this might be the type of future that we're looking for when we're moving forward. So Raquel, may I invite you to kind of just explain briefly who you are and what your project is about.
Okay, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. It is a great honor to be with you at this conference virtually all the way from Paraguay. It is 9:14 here in the morning. I know that it's your afternoon, so thank you very much to Educate Belgium for the invitation, and everyone also joining us from the distance and in Brussels. I'm very excited to share with you the work that we do at the Moises Bertoni Foundation in terms of education and climate change. My name is Raquel Frata. I'm from this wonderful country right in the middle of South America, Paraguay. I work as the leader of Initiative for the New Economy at the foundation, which Moises Bertoni is a nonprofit organization with 30 years of experience focusing on nature conservation, education, and sustainable development. I designed and I implement projects focusing on sustainability, education, and projects adding economic, social, and environmental value at this wonderful place, which is the UNESCO Baracayú Biosphere Reserve and other natural protected areas where we work in Paraguay. So just before I joined the Moises Bertoni Foundation 10 years ago, I live and study in the United States, where I graduated with a master in public administration. But what I'm very proud to say that I work with vulnerable populations in the United States, including the migrant workers, the homeless, and the single mothers, who have taught me a great deal about what does it mean to be vulnerable, what does it mean to be a migrant worker, and what does it mean to be a single mom as well. So with that background, I'm very excited to share with you all the work and the good practices that we do here at the Moises Bertoni Foundation, and what are our challenges in the area of education, focusing on sustainable development and protecting.
Now, Raquel,
yes.
we have a couple of pictures that are, at least on the Mentimeter screen, you can see a couple of them. So if you I think it's one of the projects, it's kind of the project that you set up. Can you please, there are 3 pictures. Yes, now you see them too, normally on your screen. So what do we see here?
Well, this is the Baracayú Nature Forest Reserve. It's one of the last standing forests in Paraguay in the eastern region. It's a private reserve It's 6 times the size of the capital of Asunción. Is one of the places with the greatest biodiversity in the country. And in this forest, in this reserve, we have a boarding school for young girls, for young rural and indigenous girls who attend school the last 3 years. So they are between the ages of 15 and 18 years old.
Okay, I think I have, yes. So this is something, this is the boarding school, I imagine.
Yes, this is the boarding school. This is the Centro Educativo en Baracayú. It was established 10 years ago as a conservation strategy. Why? Baracayú Forest is one of the last standing forests in the eastern region. So the question was, how are we going to protect the forest in the long run? 64,000 hectares of native primary forest. How are we going to protect when we know that conservation can no longer be taken as a side project away from the community? So the school was established with the mission and with the vision to integrate the community into their conservation quest. Yeah, and so, also yes.
So moving a bit, some taking it from what Daniela said just before, very much about, well, we have to be future oriented in one way or another to kind of go to the future and then bring it back. I see here kind of a future vision that somehow indigenous people and girls should kind of have a role in that future. Is that how that originated for you?
Yes, I mean, and I want to quote again Daniela when she said, we need to help to create alternatives for the future. And this is exactly what we do. Let's play this into context. The forest is located in a region where there is a high level of teen pregnancy, where rural women don't have the opportunity to study, their limitations are very high. So how we can change that future, how we can change the future of these girls who without access to quality education wouldn't be able to have a future. So the school was established with the mission to empower young girls, rural girls and indigenous girls to become agents of change and forest protector and agent of sustainable development, who they can change their future and change their communities.
Yeah. Okay. Very nice. Just looking at Daniela. Daniela, do you know of this initiative of Raquel?
Yes. I've met Raquel in various congresses actually, and
so is this the approach that you say, or this is going towards that approach, or maybe this is the approach already, like the whole school, the futures oriented, hands-on experiences, shifting assumptions. You know, the list.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what they do. I know what the goal is. So I can't actually comment on that because I don't know if the students are actually taught futures thinking as part of this. I know that the aspiration is very future oriented.
Yeah.
But in terms of the teaching and learning of every day and how their experience of learning might be different or not, that's where the important aspect is, and I haven't heard of that yet.
Okay, so that will be interesting to delve into that during the topics that we will discuss within the panel session. Thank you very much, Raquel. Thank you very much for this introduction. And there, I know there's much more to say about it, but we also have 2 other panelists, and I'm first going to Cecilia Faca-Jones, who is advisory board member of EdHeroes, Education Heroes. Cecilia. Good.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm Cecilia. It's a great pleasure to be here. And thank you for the invitation just to share a little bit of my knowledge and experience on the field of early childhood development. So whenever we talk about education, we tend to forget that this education process needs to start very early in life if we really want to have the impact that I completely agree with many of the things that Daniela shared with us. And I truly think that if we can start early in life, we can probably just make like a huge impact. And just a little bit of my background, because I know this part of the panel is to just share with everybody a little bit of our background. So I have been working for the Bernard Valier Foundation for 6 years. I recently resigned because I decided to go back to my home country, which is Ecuador. So if you look at my LinkedIn profile, I am currently a bikepacker and public life explorer, because this is my favorite way of learning, which is just kind of like acknowledging how important it is to be in touch with your close environment. And before working for the Bernard Valier Foundation, I was coordinating Ministry of Social Development in Ecuador. And just to share a little bit about this important ministry, I was responsible of coordinating the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Housing, the Ministry of Welfare, the Ministry of Sports, and the Ministry of Health. With this idea of really trying to make sure that you could promote a system, kind of like a system towards responding to social policy. So I hope in this panel I can share a little bit of my experience of what running like public policy around education has been like, together with really emphasizing what the early years can bring into the different experiences of dealing with climate change and how this needs to be conceived in a cross-cutting way that touches all the different sectors.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much, Cecilia. I also have a couple of pictures that you sent us. Not all of them. I know there are kind of 7 or 9 that I don't remember exactly the amount, but this is the first one. Nature leads the way. Very young people, kind of engaging them already. Could you explain why you put this one?
Well, one of the big learnings this last years, and especially during the pandemic years, is how much children need to be in touch with nature, and how important it is that part of the learning of preserving nature and just enjoying being around green and blue infrastructure. This has to be in a natural way, which means that children need to be in direct touch with nature.
Yeah. So basically,
and there are lots of experiences. We recently, in the Bernard Valier Foundation, we launched a whole book trying to relate the effects of climate change with early childhood development. And there's some great evidence on how good it is for the physical and mental development of children to be in touch with nature.
Yeah, so basically it's a bit the card box that Daniela showed in her presentation. What about this one, Design for People?
So some of the work that we were doing is trying to understand if we could think a city from 95 centimeters, which is the height of a healthy 3-year-old child. What would change in the cities in order to make cities like a better place for children to learn and explore and be more creative? And I think for me, the best solution, and here I'm talking from a practical way, is to really try to prioritize people's spaces rather than what happens in most cities around the world, which is like having a lot of public space for cars rather than having public space for people. So in this picture, I was trying to share with everybody, if we can really create these spaces where people can meet, where we can bring back green and blue infrastructure, we are also supporting to basically diminish or at least try to cope with some practical solutions to what the effects of climate change can bring.
Yeah, and then taking the 95 centimeter maybe as a guiding principle is one of those transformative way of doing that. I have, thank you very much, Cecilia, for your introduction. Then we have the last but not the least, Cécile Martin-Phipps, directeur de l'Institut de la Francophonie pour le développement durable. Je vous laisse la parole pour vous introduire.
Merci beaucoup, c'est vraiment très apprécié, Ruben. Merci aussi aux organisateurs de nous avoir invités. Donc, je suis Cécile Martin-Phipps, je représente l'Institut de la Francophonie pour le développement durable. Cet institut fait partie de la grande famille de la francophonie, dans lequel il y a aussi un institut qui est dédié à l'éducation et la formation, qui est basé à Dakar. Et qu'est-ce que c'est que la francophonie? La francophonie, c'est 88 États et gouvernements membres qui sont situés à peu près sur les 5 continents, au nord, au sud, à l'est et à l'ouest, et qui travaillent ensemble en solidarité pour justement faire progresser ces enjeux et notamment la question de l'éducation à l'environnement. Donc là-dessus, bien sûr, les deux instituts, celui de l'éducation et de la formation qui est basé à Dakar et le nôtre, basé à Québec, on travaille ensemble à réfléchir comment faire en sorte qu'on puisse renforcer les outils à la fois des enseignants sur l'éducation au changement climatique, l'éducation à limiter les déchets, qu'est-ce que c'est que l'économie circulaire, mais également répondre aux enjeux qui sont ceux évoqués par Daniela, mais aussi par Raquel, de ces enfants qui sont aussi soumis aux aléas du changement climatique, ou même à ses impacts directs, et qui ne peuvent pas aller à l'école de ce point de vue-là. Donc, qu'est-ce qu'on apporte comme réponse?
D'accord.
On n'a pas encore toutes les solutions, mais ce qui est intéressant à la francophonie, c'est qu'on a beaucoup de bonnes pratiques qui viennent de plein de pays différents. Et je vais vous donner l'exemple d'Andorre. Andorre est un petit pays que beaucoup de monde a du mal à placer sur une carte, qui est entre la France et l'Espagne. Et ce petit pays, à l'heure actuelle, est très innovant parce que quand il y a une loi sur l'environnement qui est en cours d'écriture, ou quand il y a une initiative en matière d'environnement ou de gestion des déchets typiquement, qui est en cours d'écriture, la ministre de l'Environnement va discuter avec sa collègue ministre de l'Éducation pour faire en sorte que les enseignants puissent aussi éduquer les enfants à cette loi, leur faire comprendre quel est l'intérêt de cette loi derrière. Alors, peut-être qu'on peut appeler ça du greenwashing, mais je pense que c'est intéressant aussi de donner les outils à nos enfants très tôt sur ce que c'est que le développement durable, si on veut ce sursaut, ce leapfrog en anglais, de notre monde très linéaire, où on ponctionne nos ressources et ça atterrit à la poubelle à 90%, et non durable vers un monde directement plus durable, il faut accroître l'éducation au développement durable et au changement climatique dès l'enfance. Donc à l'heure actuelle, jusqu'à présent, on s'était beaucoup focalisé à l'Institut de la francophonie pour l'environnement et le développement durable sur les décideurs et puis sur les acteurs privés et publics. Et maintenant, on s'aperçoit que notre francophonie, elle est composée à 70% de jeunes qui ont moins de 35 ans. Donc, si on ne propose rien comme éducation à l'environnement, à cette jeunesse montante, à cette jeunesse naissante, on va complètement passer à côté de ce sursaut que nous souhaitons vers un monde plus durable. Et c'est pour ça que... Oui, pardon.
Et de quelle manière l'intervention, la présentation de Danielle Tilbury vous a fait remettre en question certains principes sur lesquels vous travaillez, par exemple? Est-ce qu'elle a remis en question certaines choses?
Non, pas remise en question, c'est plutôt en fait un enrichissement. Un enrichissement parce que ce que nous recherchons, c'est vraiment de recenser toutes les bonnes pratiques qui existent dans notre francophonie, et on ne les connaît pas tous, on est en train de faire ce travail, donc c'est aussi un appel que je lance. Je vous en prie, envoyez-nous vos bonnes pratiques en matière de matériel pédagogique, de kits pédagogiques, que ce soit sous des différents formats, des bandes dessinées, des vidéos, des capsules TikTok, n'importe. Tout est bon à prendre. On cherche aussi à faire en sorte que notre programme qui s'appelle Élan, qui est un programme d'éducation et de formation aux enfants, notamment dans nos pays francophones d'Afrique subsaharienne et de l'océan Indien, est une composante sur le développement durable et l'environnement. Et Élan est intéressant parce qu'en francophonie, on n'est pas en train de promouvoir le français à tout prix. Ce que l'on cherche à faire en sorte, c'est aussi de donner des outils à ces enfants pour une meilleure littératie. Et on s'est aperçu que cette littératie va être meilleure en français si on commence en fait à éduquer nos enfants dans leur langue maternelle. Mais on n'a pas besoin.
Ok.
Tout dépend de quel matériel pédagogique vous utilisez. Typiquement, au Canada, ici, il y a une blague parce que les enfants commencent en maternelle à apprendre à lire sur un livre qui s'appelle The Chicken is Crossing the Road. Bon, c'est franchement pas très utile dans la vie réelle. Vous pourriez avoir le même livre pour apprendre à lire et qui vous dit comment éteindre la lumière en sortant ou comment recycler ses déchets.
Donc en fait, vous recherchez des bonnes pratiques qui en fait renforcent un peu l'exposé que Daniel Tilbury a fait aussi dans de How the Chicken is Crossing the Road. C'est pas très, on pourrait le faire beaucoup plus orienté vers le futur, quel futur aimerait-on avoir, etc. etc. On a trois pièces, trois sujets que l'on aimerait aborder pendant ce panel. J'ai déjà, voilà, le premier sujet est un peu la place changeante de l'éducation dans un monde en changement. Quelque chose que Daniela a beaucoup déjà, sur lequel Daniela a beaucoup présenté. Et une première question, si nous avons besoin de changer la position de l'éducation dans ce monde changeant, de quoi avons-nous besoin? Un focus plus important sur les bases. Je crois que c'est Mona qui nous avait montré un peu l'urgence dans laquelle on se trouve au niveau aussi des enfants ou des élèves qui ne reçoivent pas suffisamment d'éducation. La manière d'engager la communauté dans la communauté, le fait d'engager la communauté autant que par exemple les élèves et d'expérimenter avec beaucoup plus de formes radicales. À votre avis, si on doit changer la position de l'éducation dans ce monde changeant, que faudrait-il faire? So we see that, and I'm switching into English again, but that's also because I'm going to ask Daniela the first question about this. If we need to change the position of education, then there are a couple of things here that we have here. Can I still have the Mentimeter, please, before we move, because that we can see the results, and that Daniela can see the results?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Stefan, because I don't know why they have to be in competition. Why can't we teach the basics through involving the community and the pupils at the same time? Why can't we do that? And I found the question a bit odd because, you know, if we are going to deal with change and if we're going to have this more newer forms, our young people and our adults still need to understand the basics too. I think that's really important. You know, you do need to have those foundation tools as part of being able to take things forward. They're really, really important. The issue is not to do one at the exclusion of the other one.
Yes. So do you think that with how we invest within education at the moment, sometimes you feel that things are being put into juxtaposition from one another, that you say, oh, we need to make a choice. But is that a false choice that we are facing with those kind of things? That what you say, no, but we can do those things at the same time. Is that because we are not thinking well? Is that because we are kind of not doing it well? What do you think are the reasons that we're not seeing that we can do it together?
Yeah, we're not disconnecting. I think that, you know, we have a scenario where we have things happening in separate baskets, in separate parts of our brain, when in fact these are all connected. So I think this is part of the problem. The existing school system, the existing way of working has helped us put things in boxes.
Okay.
And we need to stop that type of education. We need to have the type of education that helps us see connections.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's part of the changes that we need. And I don't think that's that radical, because in real life, when you don't go in school, you know, things are connected. The way you live, the way you eat, the way you relate to others, they're all connected.
Yeah.
It's only schools and universities that put them into boxes.
Yeah, so we start having to look at how we connect the different things, like maybe what we do, what you say, at least how I understand it, that how we do that, that we do it in a natural way already. What about Raquel? How are you doing this within your school? How are you connecting those different things together?
Well, I have to follow with what Daniela said. And this is the way of the systemic way of learning. You know, why separating? You know, we at the Maracaibo Educational Center, we have a curriculum based on environmental education with a strong connection with the community. So how we manage the day-to-day days, the students have class during the morning, they rotate their classes in order to do projects, which is a learning-based project that they connect with the community. And so it's a very integral and holistic way of learning from the forest, you know, where the forest becomes the aula, and when the community and the projects that are implemented in the community becomes part of the aula, you know, where they learned not only with books and not only where they learn how to add and how to read.
So on a day-to-day basis, how does that look like?
Well, this is a boarding school. This is a boarding school established within the forest in a rural area where you have 60 or from 30 to 60 students per year, and they divide in two groups, you know, one that is in the aula and the other one that is doing, for example, the gardening, the vegetable gardening, or that is implementing other project in the forest. So they rotate. They have this rotation system where they also integrate STEM education, you know, robotics from the forest to the world. So it's a very holistic way of learning.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Peut-être Cécile, en ajoutant sur, vous voulez les bonnes pratiques, comment voyez-vous cette reconnexion peut-être avec la manière dont on vit l'humanité, donc de reconnecter un peu tous ces éléments ensemble? Est-ce que vous avez, vous avez aussi cette approche dans vos programmes?
Oui, tout à fait. En fait, on essaye de casser justement cet effet de silo. Nous, on le voit beaucoup en matière environnementale, mais ça vaut pour l'éducation. On s'aperçoit qu'on a beaucoup compartimenté notre monde. D'un côté, il y a l'éducation, d'un côté, il y a l'environnement, de l'autre côté, il y a l'énergie, de l'autre côté, il y a l'eau, de l'autre côté, il y a l'agriculture. Alors qu'en fait, tout ça est interconnecté, ça s'appelle la vie. Ça s'appelle la vie, et cette vie, il faut la protéger, il faut l'éduquer aussi. Il faut éduquer nos enfants à vivre cette vie au complet. Et quand on parle d'éducation à l'environnement et au changement climatique, quelque part, on parle en fait de revenir à des bonnes pratiques que nous avions il y a encore une centaine d'années. Parfois, dans certains endroits, ces bonnes pratiques, on les a encore. Et c'est pour ça que j'appelle un sursaut, en fait, et que j'appelle à nos pays francophones à partager ces bonnes pratiques, parce qu'on a perdu dans beaucoup de pays cette connexion à la nature qui est essentielle. La planète est là depuis des milliards d'années, elle nous survivra. Nous, peut-être pas. C'est à nous, justement, de nous reconnecter à ces bonnes pratiques d'avant. Et pour ça, il faut qu'on éduque nos enfants en conséquence. Si on les éduque à monter dans un 4x4, ça ne va pas marcher.
Et est-ce que nous, en tant qu'adultes, est-ce que nous, on est capable de le faire? Est-ce que nous, on a les compétences nécessaires pour pouvoir faire ce changement, pour pouvoir... parce que nous, on a été éduqués dans la manière où les silos ont été... C'était normal, on mettait tout dans des cases. Donc, est-ce que nous, on est capable de le faire? Qui est capable de le faire de bonne manière?
Je crois que oui, on nous a compartimentés, mais fondamentalement, l'être humain n'est pas compartimentalisé. Fondamentalement, l'être humain est un être d'échange et de connexion. Donc, à nous d'aller rechercher ça. C'est effectivement plus facile d'être un gros spécialiste dans son secteur, mais fondamentalement, on est des êtres d'échange. Donc, à nous de rechercher ça. Et je pense que c'est là où il faut qu'on soit vigilant en matière d'éducation, parce qu'il me semble que les apports bénéfiques qu'apporte le numérique ont aussi un gros désavantage, c'est que les algorithmes derrière nous poussent encore plus à compartimentaliser notre monde.
Okay. Merci. Thank you, Cecilia. Last but not least, for you, how do you view that? You kind of said, okay, but I'm doing all kinds of things. Maybe I'm a kind of different well, I don't know if you look at educating in a different way. How are you looking at this, kind of making that connection, interconnecting the different things?
Well, for me, I think the most important thing, and probably my colleagues have said that, but I think thinking from an environmental perspective, I do think it's important to create like an educational system, a more holistic way of educating children. And again, if we see it from the early years, so if we start talking about babies and toddlers, the youngest population in the world, and some of the important learnings, for example, of the work I have done in cities, is if you're able to enable a city that promotes healthy connections, then a children is constantly exploring and constantly learning. And I also think this is also preparing a child to make its own conclusions, to kind of like cope with some of the climate changes challenges that they will be facing, because I do want to say that a baby that is born today is going to have to face a lot of environmental issues. So if you can start really early in life, kind of like really allowing or enabling their immediate environment to become this environment where they feel part of, where they're responsible of kind of like exploring, creating, and learning. I think probably when they become adults, their response to the collective environment is also going to be different. And maybe just to give you a couple of practical examples, I've seen how, for example, many people and many people supporting climate change are great supporters of active mobility, which means that people stop using cars or motorized ways of moving around a city, for example, and start walking or biking more. And this, of course, is a challenge in many parts of the world. But what I do think that if a baby or a toddler starts experiencing to walk very early in life or to bike very early in life, and they enjoy doing that, then this becomes a habit. And if it becomes a habit, it's also easier to keep doing it through their daily life in the future.
Good. And
so I'm a big supporter of how you can really kind of like impact the life of young children in order to really make them part of the solution rather than imposing any specific learning.
And what should we then as educators unlearn in order to be able to do that?
Unlearn. I think for me, just being more open to be more innovative, to be more creative, to probably kind of leave the classroom to learn more from outside. And okay. I know that Raquel, for example, was mentioning the work with indigenous populations. And of course, coming from a country like Ecuador, where there's a lot of indigenous wisdom. So for me, it's sometimes my own experience of working with indigenous population is that there's so much we have to learn from this wisdom that we have from vernacular populations, that maybe we really need to start listening more to different ways of seeing the world and different ways of learning.
So getting out of the classroom, basically.
Be more open.
That's what you're saying, getting out of the classroom. I'm just looking at the audience here. There will be, for the people online, there will be a question, an open question will be coming for topic 2. But just at the audience here, is there a question that you would like to ask one of the ladies that we have in the panel here at this stage? Because we have this opportunity for the people that are physically here to kind of, if there is a question. Yes.
Je peux parler en français ou mon anglais?
Bien sûr. Il faut juste laisser le temps aux personnes de pouvoir changer. Mais allez-y.
Oui, je suis très intéressée par donc l'intervention de Daniela. Et je voulais lui demander dans quelle mesure aussi on ne peut pas intégrer la question de la justice climatique. Parce que, bon, par exemple, c'est très intéressant d'apprendre pour que l'APF a des volets éducation à l'environnement avec la muraille verte. Mais si c'est juste pour apprendre voilà, la bonne gestion de l'environnement, le tri des déchets, etc., je pense que ce n'est pas suffisant. Donc il y a cet aspect de l'approche basée sur les droits humains et de revendiquer aussi la justice climatique. Comment ça se fait qu'on est dans cette position? Quelle est la responsabilité des pays du Nord, du Sud, et quel impact aussi sur tous les autres êtres vivants que les êtres humains? Quelle responsabilité on a par rapport à ça?
Merci bien. Daniela, were you able to follow this question? What is the importance of climate justice in that system? And is it possible to integrate that within this transformational way that you kind of said that you explained us? How do you include climate justice in there? Because there is definitely something important there in terms of.
Thank you. Thank you for translating the question, because I'm afraid my French is not up to scratch. For me, when I talk about climate education, I am talking about climate justice. For me, it's not about going out and planting more trees. It's about addressing the inequalities in our system. It's about making sure that they are enhancing opportunities for people and breaking down practices that exploit people and planet. So for me, everything I said is climate justice, and maybe I should have spelled that out at the beginning, because at the moment our education systems are not just. They are reproducing those bad relationships that are in our society. And so this is why I think through the type of education that questions quite deeply, the kind of education that does not reproduce what's already happening, but actually starts to change the nature of our relationship with other people and with the planet, we start to address issues of climate justice. To me, they're really, really important.
Yeah,
does that address the question?
Yeah. I think it does, and it relates to me. It resonates with me with the term decolonization that you were using.
Yeah. Yes, that's absolutely right.
And then coming back to that question that I asked then earlier, what should we unlearn? Because I have the impression that we might get a bit stuck into the fact, oh yeah, we have to do it in a different way. It has to be kind of completely differently, this kind of different approach. But are we able to do that? What do we need to unlearn?
Unlearn schools as we are, schooling as we have it at the moment. Stop putting all those desks facing the front. Stop assuming that the teacher is the one who has to impart the knowledge. It is the community. It is the local supermarkets and stores. You know, it's just as important to expose our young children, our adults, our learners to the natural environment, like the experiences that are being shared, as it is to take them to the local store to see how their spending actually has an impact back on them and their choices of what they buy in their local store, you know, with their little money that they may have, the power of the purse and how it might ripple back into the community, or whether they are, you know, using the very little money they have to buy designer brands. And I know this for a fact, because last year I went to the outer national parks in Tanzania, which took me 9 hours to get there from the capital because they were so difficult to get to. And the last thing I expected to see was a chief with a Nike hat on, as a symbol or a symbolism of the power in the community. And I'm looking at development, I'm looking at nature protection, and I'm thinking consumer goods, consumerism, what they buy in the local store, their trading, what they value. All this is connected to education and learning. All this is connected to relationships, whether they be global relationships and branding, or relationships which feed back into the local community and reinforce the value of what happens in those communities.
Yeah, thank you very much. This brings us also a bit to the second topic, which is about the changing position of the pupil student, kind of that critical thinking as a guiding principle, where I also have a question like, how should we, teachers, schools and system around approach pupils and students so that they are prepared for a changing world? So again, if you're not online, menti.com, code 52270089. So I'm very curious to know about the audience here in Brussels, but also the audience around the world. How should we then approach pupils, students, so that they're prepared for a changing world? We already said a few things about that, but I'm curious to see also what people think about that. And if you have a question, you can put that also in there if you want to. Obviously, we should. You might have an idea, which is great. But if you're not sure, but you still have questions, then you can put them there too. Challenge them by experience, debate, philosophy. Invest in digitalization and promote critical thinking, making them appreciate nature. Intégrer dans le programme d'enseignement. To this end, we also need to know alternative government structures that we can educate students about. Ask the pupils, students themselves. Ask the pupils and students themselves, yes. En partant de leur sensibilité de la dimension subjective. Ellen, can you go a bit up? Yes. Qu'ils ont déjà des défis environnementaux et sociaux. Connecting again with nature in an authentic way. Just wondering what an authentic way would mean then. Learning through play. Make everybody accountable for small actions of their lives. Okay. Let them use their creativity to become change actors. Provide basic skills and let them experience with these skills. Accompagner la formation des enseignants, leur donner des outils. Permettre aux enfants de pratiquer, de toucher, de ne pas juste faire des sessions en classe, comprendre les enjeux autour de soi. Cecilia, if you're looking at those answers, you have been able to read them a bit, I hope. What answers do you see here? Are these the answers that we're looking for in order to kind of approach our students?
Yes, I think we should be able to do them all. I don't think there's one answer to that question. But of course, from my perspective, from what I've seen is working well, it's being able to create these healthy connections that we were talking before, right? And again, talking from the early years perspective, when we think that a baby is making up to 1 million connections every second, and the very first years of life, we are really kind of ensuring if this baby or human being is going to be able to develop all this healthy connections in he or her brain, then I'm thinking, okay, which is the best way that we can enable the environment to do that? And for me, my answer would be is just ensuring that you're creating opportunities to observe, to listen to new things, to create and co-design things together, to be able to almost really try to use as many senses as possible in order to really be part of that process. So just really trying to understand that for me, some of this really impactful learning processes need to happen in a way that people will remember. And as Daniela was saying, we've seen that, for example, children that are able to have more contact with the local communities, when you have a child be able to meet his neighbors or go to the shops and talk to the people there, run their own surveys, understand the natural environment that surrounds them, experiment with the natural elements around them, play with water, play with natural elements. That's what makes them aware of many of the things that have to do with some of the environmental challenges that we have. Breathe, for example, one of the interesting... experiments that we did, just an example of with air was around like, what do children think about air pollution, for example, which is such a big topic on environmental change. And it's interesting to see how very young children can be very aware of how harmful air can be if they really understand how is this impacting their health and life.
Okay, so kind of let them experience kind of the a new way of doing. Raquel, how are you doing this within the nature reserve, within the boarding school? Many of those answers, are you implementing them all too?
Well, the idea is place the student at the center of the action, and what it means is learning by doing, and as mentioned before, also let them create, build, and also using social art as a tool for behavior change. Art is a very powerful tool to connect with other people, because through art we can connect our heart and our mind and our hands, as Daniela was mentioning earlier in her presentation. And I think that is very powerful as a tool for education.
So putting the students central to basically building the curriculum, to building kind of the whole learning approach. What is for you the most surprising that you learned doing that?
Is how creative the students can be when you give them the opportunity to have their own voice and to use their own voice to solve a problem or to give you a solution. You will be very surprised how they can explore a solution from their point of view.
Okay, and so kind of basically asking the students means that you get surprised by their point of view and how you can do it, and so basically as an educator, it's kind of asking those questions to the students, to the pupils, being one of the main things that you should be doing. Great, yeah. Daniela, do you have any things to kind of add on this in terms of?
Yeah, I just go back to what I was trying to argue, which is that we have institutionalized learning, right?
Yeah.
We're putting learning into the schools, and we are more concerned with building buildings in places that require basic learning sometimes, and tying that basic learning to things that have already been taught for centuries in their community, which is valued and useful to their communities. But we've institutionalized learning. We focus our efforts on building schools as physical structures, on having equipment that faces the front.
Yeah.
And I think it's about time that we questioned that type of learning, not just have it in the forest, which is great, but have it in the community as it has always been, and formalize that learning and what is valued and what can be learned.
Okay, and should we then get rid of diplomas, for example, in schools, like you said?
No.
Okay, no? Okay.
No, but the buildings, why are we only considering learning to be what is understood when you sit down on a desk, on a chair, looking to the front?
Yeah, Raquel, Raquel, do you still have like school classrooms where you have like the blackboard and then you have like the desks and facing the blackboard? Do you still have that?
Yeah, I mean, we do have that as well, because, you know, sometimes we have presentations, but it's the way of learning. Currently, for example, we have a project called Voices of Maracaju, which is a podcasting project where the students learn the skills to enhance their own voices and to talk about sustainable tourism, climate change, and sustainable development. And the classroom, of course, just become an space where they can use also technology, digital technology, to implement this podcasting project. So we do use both, you know, the old fashion of, you know, someone presenting something, but at the same time strongly focusing on learning by doing, which is not necessarily by sitting and just listening.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Is there a question from the audience again here? From the audience here in Brussels. If you have, just raise your hand. Then I will give you also the floor to ask one of those panel members to ask them a question. Cécile, est-ce que vous en êtes déjà au point où vous envisagez de ne plus construire des écoles, en tout cas de ne plus, je ne sais pas si vous construisez des écoles, je ne pense pas, peut-être pas, mais en tout cas d'envisager une autre approche que le bureau avec, qu'est-ce que je dis, le tableau avec les
oui, surtout sur l'éducation à l'environnement, en fait. Vous avez raison, et moi, I relate really to what Daniela and Raquel said about that. Dans ce que nous voyons, en fait, des bonnes pratiques dans nos pays francophones, la plupart des messages sont passés, en fait, par rendre actifs, justement, nos étudiants, que ce soit les enfants ou que ce soit les jeunes ou même ceux à l'université. De différentes façons, vous avez différents matériels pédagogiques qu'on peut utiliser. Et le premier, c'est effectivement de les mettre sur le terrain et de leur faire expérimenter ces différentes approches. Ça peut être en donnant, par exemple, la responsabilité à ces enfants de devenir des éco-délégués. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire, en fait, d'essayer de transformer son école. Ça peut vouloir dire aussi faire tout un travail pour mesurer l'empreinte écologique de votre école. Ça peut être de travailler avec la cantine scolaire pour faire en sorte qu'on mange plus local. C'est vraiment les réancrer aussi dans leur réalité et dans la vie concrètement, que ce soit en forêt ou que ce soit en milieu urbain, en milieu rural, ça se fait tout à fait. Il y a beaucoup de bonnes pratiques qu'on devrait diffuser beaucoup plus largement.
Oui, alors juste Hélène, tu peux, can you put the results again? Because what I was just wondering, the panel members, thank you, Cécile, because the question that you kind of put in front of my mind when you said that is, what would a student, or what would students have said when we would have asked this question? Like, how should we teach a school, or how should teach a school system around approach me so that they're prepared for, so that I'm prepared for a changing world? What do you think they would have put in there? Would that be any different? What kind of things would you have seen there? Who would like to take the floor there? Cecilia, what do you think they would have asked?
I think probably many children nowadays, and again, it depends if it's the rural context or the urban context, and maybe just because I've been working a lot on the urban context, and also because a lot of children do live in the urban context. I do think a lot of children enjoy learning through technologies, and we also think we saw it during the pandemic on how I think the educational system had never adapted so fast to change. We can question if that change was good or bad, and also the technological gap that we had in many different countries, and how difficult it is to overcome that.
But at least we can change. At least we know now that we can change as education.
Exactly,
that we can transform ourselves. Yes,
quite fast.
Daniela,
what I think the educational sector is quite close many times to say, oh, we cannot change that, because then there isn't like that adaptability, and the pandemic did show us that we can change fast.
Yeah.
But I do think a lot of people enjoy using technological networks. I just think we also need to be careful to balance how to use that.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Daniela, what do you think a student or students would have answered to this question that we asked? What do you think they would have answered?
Opportunities to influence. And
opportunities to influence. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the situation is they don't want to know more. I think they have the tools themselves to find out what they need to know. You know, and the schools focus so much on that. And I think the other side of that coin is help them to understand how to influence in their community, in their governments, in their social aspects, in their work you know, even when they go and take up employment, how can they start to influence, to change and shape things for a different future? Because all they know is how to go on the streets and protest. They think that that's change, and it's not. It's just making their voices visible. It doesn't actually change anything. And because the schools haven't shown them the different ways in which you can influence, what's in your control to influence, and which is the most powerful way you can do it, and what's the most effective way you can do it. And so I was saying, if you give them experiences of real life where they're involved in change in their communities, with their parents, with their volunteer groups, they will become better and better and better at learning to know, but also learning to do change.
Yeah. So asking for influence. We have a question here from the room.
Merci, je vais poser ma question en français.
Allez-y, allez-y.
Donc, c'est vraiment intéressant, les approches qu'on a présentées par rapport au changement dans le système d'éducation et l'éducation. Et nous sommes en train de voir les questions environnementales, sachant qu'on travaille au niveau local pour chercher des solutions globales. Maintenant, ma question, c'est de savoir, on ne veut sortir les enfants de l'école, on veut sortir des écoles bâtiments vers l'école nature. On veut apprendre une autre façon de faire pour connecter les gens avec la nature. Ça, c'est ceux qui ont déjà l'école. C'est ceux qui travaillent déjà dans le système qui... On dit les systèmes... Maintenant, on cherche les systèmes best practice. Ça veut dire ceux qui ont essayé ça et qui sont déjà dans la nature. Oui. Mais je vais poser la question, est-ce que vous avez étudié ceux qui n'ont jamais connu les bâtiments? Est-ce que vous savez qu'en Afrique subsaharienne, il y a des enfants qui n'ont jamais eu de classe. Ils sont sous l'arbre et c'est l'école. Le tableau, on écrit sur les papiers, on s'assied par terre, on a toujours fait ça. Ça veut dire qu'ils sont maintenant les professeurs. Est-ce qu'on peut partir maintenant chez eux, oublier les systèmes politiques existants et étudier, comprendre et tirer des leçons de ceux qui n'ont jamais eu l'école, ceux qui n'ont pas d'ordinateur jusqu'à aujourd'hui? Quand on parle de digitalisation, on parle d'ordinateur sur le cours, même à l'université. Il y a des lycées. En Afrique, les enfants n'ont jamais vu, je dis voir, pas toucher un ordinateur. Oui. Est-ce que maintenant, dans le cadre de la coopération au développement, on peut imaginer que maintenant on rentre dans ces sociétés parce qu'ils sont dans ce que vous cherchez? Oui. Maintenant, on va étudier ça, on tire des leçons et on applique dans les écoles qu'on veut détruire ou bien reconstruire.
Que peut-on apprendre donc des écoles?
Pas seulement apprendre, mais il faudrait apprendre et puis bâtir, reconceptualiser les choses.
Oui, comment reconstruire l'éducation? Oui, comment reconstruire l'éducation à partir d'élèves, d'enfants qui n'ont pas encore qui n'ont jamais eu l'occasion d'être dans un bâtiment et qui sont déjà dans la nature. Yeah. Cécile, je vais vous donner cette question-ci. Et on va en venir aussi au prochain. Comment faire pour reconstituer donc l'éducation, peut-être même à partir donc de personnes qui n'ont jamais connu le bâtiment même?
Alors effectivement, bon, quand même en zone très sahélienne, il y a quand même des écoles qui sont avec des parpaings et des tôles et on crève de chaud dessous et on n'y reste pas très longtemps. Mais il y a quand même des écoles. Cependant, effectivement, la question est tout à fait valable, bien entendu, et je crois que c'est important d'y répondre. Nous, on y répond de plusieurs manières. Bien sûr, il faut distribuer et faire en sorte qu'ils aient accès aussi au numérique, et c'est ce qu'on fait à travers les CLAC. Ce sont des centres d'éducation et d'informations culturelles qui sont au nombre de 350 à peu près dans nos pays francophones africains.
Et Cécile,
et là, c'est des tablettes qui marchent aussi en 2G, 3G, mais c'est pas suffisant. Par contre, ce qu'on voit, c'est qu'on peut pousser de l'information et de l'éducation aussi sur les téléphones. Aujourd'hui, le nombre de personnes qui ont des téléphones, qui ne sont pas forcément des smartphones, hein, mais il suffit d'avoir la 2G ou 3G pour pousser déjà de l'information et de l'éducation là-dessus.
Et Cécile, comment intégrez-vous donc est-ce que vous avez déjà dans vos programmes l'intégration des connaissances de ces personnes-ci sous les baobabs en train d'apprendre pour pour redéfinir l'éducation? Est-ce que vous intégrez déjà ces connaissances-ci?
Mais en fait, ce que nous voyons, c'est que l'éducation, même sous un baobab, enfin moi j'en ai pas vu sous les baobabs, hein, mais sous la tôle ondulée, l'éducation reste très formelle. Et c'est là où justement il faudrait peut-être qu'on les connecte mieux, ces enfants, à leur réalité, qu'on leur dise et qu'on leur donne les outils pour justement réagir à ces changements climatiques qu'ils constatent et qu'ils vivent concrètement. Parce qu'apprendre à lire et à écrire, c'est super, mais apprendre à lire et écrire et tout en s'adaptant à notre milieu, c'est encore mieux.
Oui, d'accord. On va passer au troisième sujet, qui, vous le verrez aussi sur votre Mentimeter, traite un peu de la place à donner à l'éducation climatique. Quand on se réalise que beaucoup d'enfants et de jeunes ne reçoivent pas d'éducation formelle, ne reçoivent pas d'éducation de base, que faut-il faire avec cela? D'abord une question. Combien d'enfants et de jeunes ne reçoivent pas d'éducation de base? Et c'est des chiffres de l'UNESCO. À votre avis, c'est 144 millions, 244, 344 ou 444 millions, à votre avis? Quel est... Et on voit un peu le résultat qui entre. Et donc, on voit que surtout beaucoup de personnes pensent que c'est 344 millions. Certains pensent que c'est 440 millions, 244 millions. En fait, la bonne réponse, en tout cas d'après l'UNESCO, c'est 244 millions, ce qui néanmoins reste énorme. Donc, il y a quelque chose, quelque chose de très urgent avec quelque chose de très urgent dans ceci. Et une autre une question qui rejoint la question que la dame vient de poser. Comment préparer ces enfants? Quelle éducation ont-ils besoin pour comment préparer ces enfants donc, à ce monde changeant où le changement climatique est vraiment très va devenir, ne va pas devenir, l'est déjà, est déjà très urgent en fait. Et quelle est l'éducation dont ces enfants ont besoin, à votre avis? Je vous laisse. Leur donnant les capacités pour construire des solutions innovantes. Give them access to quality basic education. Learn to read and write and critically reflect on knowledge out there. So very much the critical way, revolution, even someone says, we need a revolution. Life competences. Culturally relevant localized education. From the culture of the parents. The parents needs to be made aware. Outdoor education, which is already there. Learn how to claim their rights. Integrate parents and communities in awareness-raising activities. There's still need for the basics combined with life skills. So there's a combination there that needs to be made. An education that's adapted to their needs. So there's lots of critical thinking, life skills, but also revolution. Daniela, how do you view the matter of revolution? How do you view the matter of the parents in there, the community in there? Well, maybe just starting with revolution.
I don't think we need a revolution, but we do need transformation. We need to integrate the ways of learning and living that many communities have had for centuries with the way in which we want to advance education. I think we can connect these two.
Yeah.
And maybe that's revolutionary in linking things. I don't know. But it's not as if we're coming up with things from scratch. They are there. And what we want to do is to connect their realities with the learning. Because the learning that happens in these classrooms is so artificial and so disconnected from their realities that they are two separate things, and they cannot be two separate things. They have to be together if they have any chance at all of surviving climate change and surviving everything else that's hitting us in this 21st century. And I'm not just talking about the particular countries we're concerned with. I'm talking about globally. We have the situation that education is failing us. And so, yes, let's connect. Let's connect what's happening in these classrooms with their everyday lives. Let's connect the head with the hand and the heart. Let's connect the communities with the academic work. I'm not saying we need to get rid of any qualifications or that they shouldn't do schooling in the formal sense. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that they need to be more connected to the realities that face them at this present moment in time.
Now, when do you know that we are on the right way? How do you know that? How would you know, as being a research, an academic person, how would you know that we are on the right way? What would you see then in terms of that?
Well, I was asking questions about how I was introduced because I didn't hear an introduction about my background. I'm not an academic. So, you know, my experience is very much working with communities and as well as policymakers to address these issues. For us, it's really quite important that we see visible changes, and there has been a lot of very positive changes, you know, particularly in countries in Asia and Africa, but Latin America, you know, when I go to Colombia and I see the work on the ground in terms of connecting their cultural roots to some of the key aspirations they have for the future, which always involves living in harmony with the environment and developing their own skills on the environment so that they can develop economies around them. You know, there are lots of practices out there, and it would take us a whole entire conference of sharing good examples of practice. But because we are so consolidated in our time and we have such little time to talk about it, we have to talk about principles, because we don't have time to share all the wonderful work that's already taking place.
So moving the kind of discussions that we have away from this, maybe the word fossilized is a good way of fossilized way of education, and moving more towards now sharing the good practices, how we connect with the surroundings around us. Raquel, thank you very much, Daniela. Raquel, how do you see the critical thinking in the girls at the boarding school? How do you see any change? Do you see that they are thinking differently than what you would experience when you're out of that setting?
Yes, well, going back to your question, how do we see that we are in the right track? And I'm very happy to share with you that the students at the Maracayú Educational Center, after they graduate, a few years ago, they have established an association called, in Spanish, Brotes of Maracayú, Seeds of Maracayú, which was established by the girls in order to further their actions towards sustainable development and also promoting actions that are important for them. Yesterday, one of our former students was in the Netherlands, as a matter of fact, receiving a prize for a project that she has designed. So we truly see the impact of doing the work that we do with girls in the middle of the forest and raising a new generation of rural girls focusing on becoming agents of change.
So was one of the girls in the Netherlands? Is that what you're saying? Did I understand that well? Yeah. So what was her experience? What did she notice? When she came back? I mean, in terms of critical thinking, what do you think? Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize that, or I didn't.
Well, we see a lot of girls accessing scholarships to study abroad. 3 girls have been to Costa Rica, to Earth University. Most of them are also working in enterprise where they promote sustainable tourism. So we see that the education is truly transforming their life because it's pertinent to the realities that we face. And that's something that I really want to focus on. Let's make an education that is pertinent to the realities that we face, and that we give them the skills that are needed for this new century.
Okay, thank you very much, Raquel. I'm moving to Cecilia. Maybe a question that is more kind of, because we're kind of 9 minutes away, 10 minutes away from the end of this session. Like, what are the two things, Cecilia, for you that you say, okay, this is the two messages that people should kind of retain from this session for you? What do you think they should be?
Thank you. I think lots of things to be said, but if I would have to choose two important things, I do think the educational system needs to ensure more healthy connections, as I said before. And when I'm talking about connections, I'm talking about connections with nature, connections among people. And this is not something that just children want, but I think people in general want. We need more spaces that enable these connections. We need more opportunities that promote this kind of exchanges that Raquel was mentioning. So for me, the one important thing is really thinking about the educational system as an opportunity to connect and to connect to what's happening now. Yeah. And maybe the second thing that I would say is I do think the educational system needs to focus on enabling children to develop skills that can be helpful to come in a very creative and prepared way to face many of the environmental challenges that they will have in the future. And I think that this is a responsibility of the whole system. And when I'm talking about the system, I'm not talking about the educational system, I'm talking about the social system and the way that we're able to support that creation, or the way that we're able to really kind of promote these new skills that are required. And the skills might be different depending the place in the world that we work in or we live in. But I do think that we need to change the focus from having all this knowledge to developing skills, to learning from the wisdom of many different communities, to learn about what's happening in our own surrounding and context. So those were the two big messages things I would like to share.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Cecilia. And then for the people, for the audience, basically, I have put also on the Mentimeter, like, what are for you the principal insights from this session. Cécile, pour vous, quelles sont vos deux leçons principales, ou en tout cas deux messages qu'il faudrait retenir de cette séance, de cette séance?
Merci beaucoup. Écoutez, moi je retiens horizontalité. Je crois qu'il faut qu'on casse les silos. Donc c'est incroyable et vraiment positif d'avoir une session justement sur l'éducation à l'environnement et au changement climatique, parce qu'on en parle peu. Donc ça, c'est la première chose. Et je ne vais pas reprendre ce que disait Cécilia, mais c'est vraiment ça. Faire en sorte que l'éducation soit une opportunité pour les enfants de se connecter avec leur monde réel. Et puis, circularité. Si on veut faire en sorte que notre monde, qu'il y ait ce sursaut vers un monde plus durable, il faut qu'on donne les outils à nos enfants dans n'importe quel milieu, qu'ils soient sous des baobabs, des tôles ondulées ou dans des classes en dur et magnifiques, pour penser différemment et penser ce monde de façon circulaire et non plus linéaire.
D'accord, merci, merci Cécile. Raquel, what are for you the two messages that people should go away with from this panel session? Raquel, did you hear me?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was thinking when I saw you. What are for you the two main messages as takeaways from this panel session, this panel discussion that you had?
Let's make education pertinent to the realities that we face, and let's place the student at the center of the action.
Okay, so education at the center of the action. And the first one, you were so quick.
No, let's place the students at the center of the action.
Place the students at the center of the action, yes.
And let's make education pertinent to the challenges that we face.
Yes, and let's make education pertinent to the challenges we face. Thank you very much, Raquel. Daniela, what about you? The two main messages.
So I would like to actually reinforce a key message I said earlier, that I think after our discussion, I realized how pertinent it is to this particular community, which is that we need to change our schools from being mirrors to being lighthouses. You know, we really do need to stop to show how things work in our community through our schools or through the learning activity. We need to start to use schools and learning as an opportunity to see what could be rather than what is, you know, to create alternatives to the world we live in at the present time. And that requires developing different skills and different ways of thinking to the ones that are being developed by education and learning at this moment in time. And climate change education holds the key to that transformation from one to the other. So I do hope that more and more learners and educators will take on board the climate education message in its true sense.
Thank you very much, Daniela. So moving towards education as a lighthouse, and maybe can I have the Mentimeter so that we can see what people have, what their main insights were, very much about connection, the interconnection, rethink education, meaningful and authentic. There are kind of lots of those elements that we have discussed today that that came back. I would like to think the four of you, to think Daniela Tilbury, to think, and now I have to look also. There we have. I know the first names, but the surnames kind of got away during this during the whole discussion. So Daniela Tilbury, Raquel Fratta, Cecilia Vaca-Jones, and Cécile Martin-Phipps. Thank you very much for your input, your conversation. Very insightful, and I think, well, with this, we hope that that we will move forward with education as a transformative power. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.